And we're back. Good afternoon. My name is David Frise, and this is the BESA National Conference 2021. A couple of housekeeping matters before we crack on. Hashtag BESA National Conference 2021 should be used if you're doing social media. You could. And also a couple more roundtables, sponsor roundtables this afternoon. So at 1:30, Measuring IEQ for Building and Occupant Health, sponsored by Swegon. And at 2:30, Keeping It Clean, Water Quality in HVAC Systems, sponsored by SWEP International Hub. So check those out. So now we move on to transforming building safety culture. And we welcome Andrew Moore, who is Industry Competence Lead at the Health and Safety Executive. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon.
So we've dealt with quite a few. George Clark, in his opening keynote speech, talked quite a bit about Grenfell and the output of that and what would happen. And I've just finished a session with Paul Morrell talking similarly about the Building Safety Act. So yours fits perfectly on that. You've, as they say, been set up. I'm going to let you do your presentation and come back for the Q&A. Don't forget, you can ask questions throughout, either in the chat or in the Q&A. And we'll come back to that later. But over to you, Andrew.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. As I say, my name is Andrew Moore, and I'm the Industry Competence Lead on the Building Safety Programme within the Health and Safety Executive. Just very briefly, a little bit about myself. I've been HSE over 20 years, most of my time within a frontline role. So that means visiting sites, investigating incidents, taking enforcement action. And I've been in the building safety team just over a year now. And my focus very much is on industry competence. That's ensuring industry, so those in the private sector, understand the new requirements and have the necessary tools and experience to meet them. So my presentation today is going to be about 20 minutes long, just really giving an overview of what the building safety regulator is, what it means for you, essentially, and then hopefully 10 minutes or so to answer any questions. Fantastic. So just to start off with, some of the aims of the building safety regulator. I suppose it's useful to reflect back, as was just mentioned, the horrific Grenfell tragedy is the catalyst for all of this, and Dame Judith Hackett's independent review which followed that tragedy, which recommended a new system for high-risk buildings, a new regulatory system. She concluded that the regulation at the time wasn't fit for purpose, and one of the key recommendations was a building safety regulator that looked at high-rise buildings, and HSE was chosen to take on this role. Sort of looking at the slide there, I'm not going to go through everything there, but I think just picking out the fact that I think HSE was chosen for this role as we have a reputation of being quite proportionate, being evidence-based and being risk-based. And these are all things that Dame Judith Hackett was quite clear that the regulator needed to take on. Again, competence is quite a key aspect of the new regime, and I'll come to that in more detail in a minute. I suppose in summary, what the BSR, the purpose of it is to look for cultural change really across the built environment, across those designing, those constructing and those maintaining buildings. It will be a more stringent regulatory regime, there's no question about that, but hopefully that will build people's confidence in the new building safety system, and also will be beneficial to everyone. With increased focus and standards, I think that will be good for the good guys that are trying to get it right, providing a more even playing field and avoid that dreaded race to the bottom. So just to kind of get into a bit more of the detail there, the Building Safety Bill, which is put before Parliament on the 5th of July, gives the powers and enacts the Building Safety Regulator. And the Building Safety Regulator has three main functions. The first of those functions will be the new building control for higher risk buildings. So the local authority or private sector approvers, will no longer have a role with high-rise buildings. That will go to the building safety regulator, and it will introduce a new regime, and will have within the design and build process the concept of gateways, which is a kind of a go no go aspect that requires the duty holder to get approval of the regulator before we move on to the next stage. In occupation, there'll be the requirement for safety cases to explain how you're managing the building safely. And underpinning all of this is something called the golden thread that needs to be created to store information. And these terms, may be new to you, may not be, or you may be familiar with them. But actually, as the presentation goes on, I'll give some more context as to what those mean. But it's not just the new regulatory regime that the building safety regulator is bringing in. We're actually looking to promote competence, and not just competence in high-rise buildings, but competence across the built environment, and competence in all buildings. And I suppose at this point, I probably would like to double down on that particular point, because certainly I've had feedback from colleagues and stakeholders that who believe the whole focus of this new regime is just high-rise buildings, and I suppose, don't know how to put it, but the kind of coming back and saying, well, actually, if I'm not working on high-rise buildings, this won't affect me. And I suppose what I'd like to explain here is that the legislation and the focus on competence goes across all buildings. So it won't just be a case that you can avoid, or one could avoid high-rise buildings, and this won't affect us. It will affect everyone working on buildings. And oversight is the next element. And again, this is across all buildings. The BSR will be bringing in a new building advisory committee, and the BSR will become the overseer of the building control profession. So although we are not the building control profession for non-high-rise buildings, we will be overseeing the profession to ensure that there is a level of consistency taken with all of the work across all buildings. I think total acknowledgement, the BSR can't do this on its own, working closely with partner regulators. And this slide here introduces the concept of a multidisciplinary team. And what this means is there's a sort of understanding that actually the best way to look at some of the problems, and certainly Grenfell being a good example of this, is to look at them holistically. So rather than one regulator looking at one thing and another regulator looking at something else, we have this multidisciplinary team concept where the BSR, local authority building control, private sector building control, fire service, housing officers all get together in one team to look at the work that's going on holistically. I think also, as sets out in that slide as well, that there will be some sort of cost recovery mechanism yet to be developed that will come in for that work. Again, hopefully this slide is legible. It may well be a little bit small, but this gives a bit of the overview, a kind of a visual overview of what the regulatory regime is likely to do, what the process is. And if you look from left to right, we're in design, then build, then occupation. And there's certainly in the design and build stage, there's a number of gateways that need to be got through. And these are essentially go, no-go points, so that you as a duty holder or a duty holder can't go from the planning stage to the design stage unless there is approval of the regulator. So there's it'd be quite a much more hands-on role for the regulator in this respect. And thinking about the design phase, there'll be much more focus on design than possibly there has been in the past. It's something that it may take longer from the design point of view, but actually it's going to be part of the assessment process, because the assessment process moving forward throughout the stages isn't necessarily just going to be about compliance with the building regs. It's also going to be about how well the building complies with the design. So there's a much more emphasis on building something to design, and that assessment will be made by the regulator. So a much more structured change control processes are likely to be required. I'll talk about the in-occupation stuff, the safety case element in a little bit as I move through the presentation. Just want to pick up the golden thread, because this is a term that's used, and you may have heard of it, but just wanted to unpack that a little bit. The golden thread is essentially important information about the building as it moves through the life cycle from planning to design, etc., that needs to be kept and retained. I think importantly, it's not everything about the building. It's important information. So I think the challenge to those working with the golden thread is to discern what's fundamentally important and keep it, and discern what isn't. Because I think in my experience, there's two ways to lose information. One way is to throw it out, and one way is to keep it with everything else, because it invariably gets lost and you can't access it. So there will be a requirement for more sophisticated information management systems, I believe, with the golden thread requirements. I'm just going to skip this next slide and come on to competence. So competence is the area that I'm more from my most familiar area. And just to kind of step back on the way HSE is approaching industry competence, we're following the recommendations of Dame Judith Hackett, and she basically said that she didn't think that it was for government to prescribe the levels of industry competence in all the various trades, professions, crafts, etc. That's actually something for industry to do, for private industry, for those trades, crafts, etc. Because acknowledging actually it's not government who's best placed to do that. It's actually those people that are carrying out those roles, trade associations, the bodies who understand those activities. So the role that we're playing with the HSE and others is to have discussions to ensure that the balance between being aspirational and actually not going backwards, going forward, and setting competency requirements which will really meet the needs of the new regime, balancing those aspirations with proportionality. Because actually you can go too far in some circumstances, and you can set the bar too high. That means it's unachievable. So trying to get that balance between proportionality on one hand and achievability on the other hand is certainly where I probably spend most of my time at the moment. And we'll try and get it right. And I think what helps is as much engagement and constructive debate with various people and various bodies across private industry to ensure that we've got that balance right. Competence in this shape and form includes competence of building control. So the BSR will oversee the building control profession and set the competency requirements there. And we're working with other organisations such as BSI, British Standards Institute, to create standards. At the moment, there are 4 standards that have been developed or in development. There's a core competency standard which has been developed, and there are 3 what are called PAS standards for the new roles, which are building safety manager, principal designer, and principal contractor. And obviously, those of you familiar with health and safety law will understand those roles from a health and safety context, and they are now being utilised and used within a building regs context. And again, excuse me, just to re-emphasize the point that I made earlier, these roles are not, the principal designer and principal contractor roles are not exclusive to high-rise buildings. These roles and the legislation will be required for all buildings, all projects across the whole sector. So everything from your domestic extension to the shard. So again, that's something that's new, and something obviously we'll look to support with the standards and some of the other guidance. We've also have an interim industry competence committee, and this is looking for I suppose to bridge the gap is the best way to describe it, between industry and the private industry and the BSR. So the committee is populated with experts who can advise the BSR and advise industry in the steps required to make the strategic improvements in competence that are required. Okay, so safety case. I wanted to spend a bit of time on the safety case side because it's I think it's something that might be interesting to some in the audience. I mean, ultimately, safety case is a new concept and a new topic for buildings. It's something which is more familiar with the kind of the high hazard chemicals sector or nuclear or aviation. But and ultimately, it's something which, at its core principle, should be relatively straightforward. It's looking at the potential for harm, the risk of that harm, so the risk of something bad happening. What's the likelihood of that? Excuse me. And thinking about the measures that are in place to effectively reduce these risks or the likelihood of that consequence. So, thinking about that in a more practical sense, your safety case that you have for a building is the evidence of what you're doing to control those risks. So it may be a fire assessment, it may be some of the evidence that you've drawn from your golden thread. So the safety case is essentially that evidence base that you're doing a good job managing your building. The safety case report is a document, a narrative that summarizes that activity. And these are two new requirements that for in occupation. So when you are managing a building which is being occupied, that will come into force. Here, proportionality is key. It can't be too long, and it needs to be fit for purpose. It's really about telling a story for the building. I'm just going to jump on. I can move across that one, and I think I'll jump across this slide as well because I want to get to the building safety manager. Again, this is a new role that's been created by the Building Safety Bill. It's something, again, I've got quite intimate knowledge about because I'm in the BSI standards steering group. I think it's important to say this role isn't a duty holder. So there's the accountable person who essentially is the person who's responsible for the building is the duty holder. The building safety manager is the person who should support them. So not a duty holder in law, but there's someone who needs to manage every single high-rise building. So every single building needs to have a building safety manager. And just very briefly, they're not expected to be experts in any particular area. It's not meant to be experts in structural safety or experts in fire safety, but they need to have a breadth of experience across those different disciplines to be able to ask intelligent questions and understand the information that's coming back to them. So we're looking for the building safety manager to have a breadth of experience, not necessarily the depth, but enough depth to be able to be an intelligent customer. I'm conscious of time, and I think I just finally summarize what you can do to prepare. I mean, I think, again, looking at safety cases, I think that's about telling the story. I mean, a competence would be the thing that I would just briefly before I finish like to focus in on. I think that for everyone, I would say that the challenge will be to actually think about the training needs that your members of staff or contractors that you might be using, or if you're a contractor yourself, actually the training needs that you might need for the new regime, and how you're going to get those, and what it is, what you can put in place now to get there. I mean, I think one of the things that I have quite a lot of conversation with training providers, and they say that actually the courses to help people get to grips with the new regime are out there, but actually there isn't the demand at the moment. And I suppose the great fear from government and others is that those people in private industry effectively sit on our hands for a while, and we get into that same situation recently with the HGV lorry drivers crisis, that no one has the right skills or experience required for the new regime, because everyone's left it a little bit too late. So my plea would be to investigate the types of training and extra skills you may require doing your job in the new regime, and put them in place as soon as possible. And I would say, as a minimum, think about structural safety, fire safety, what additional awareness they might need in the future and think about how to get that. I think that's it from me. I'm conscious of got to my slot, and yeah, happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. First of all, does the HSE have sufficient resource to run this scheme?
Yeah, very much so. I think at the moment we're developing it. So I think we've got the resource in place um, to put in place a new regulatory regime. What we're doing at the moment is carrying out a skills assessment, and we'll actually put in place quite a significant recruitment drive within the next, I suppose, year to 18 months to ensure that we have sufficient staff and sufficient people coming in to meet the needs. I think it's fair to say that we couldn't just take staff from the existing HSE and put them into building safety regulator. So our business plan is actually to recruit a significant number of new staff to fulfill the demand.
Excellent. That's good to hear. You described the process as design, build, occupation. I think most of our members would say it's build, design, occupy, snag, and then commission some point during that whole process. Are we going to see an end to that build and design? Because if you want to change culture, that's one of the big things to get rid of the hurry scurry. And secondly, have we seen the end of value engineering? Because clients understand that there is a price to pay, shall we say, or a cost to value engineering as it currently operates.
So certainly with the as you describe it, build design. I mean, I think one of the key aspects of the new regime, certainly with the high-rise buildings, is to ensure that the design is finalized, finished, bottomed out before you can move to the next step. And that's going to be, I think that's probably going to be, as you alluded to, quite a big change. And actually, that's something which we are going to enforce quite robustly, because ultimately, thinking about the gateway process, you will not be able to move from design phase into construct phase unless your design fulfills the necessary requirements. And as part of the regulatory regime, we will be the BSR will be assessing against the design. I think that's quite a new thing, because rather than just coming in and looking at compliance with the building regs, which obviously we'll do that as well, we're looking at compliance with the design and actually holding people to account against the design, and actually being quite firm when it comes to change controls. And the reason for this, I think, it is to ensure there isn't design creep, because actually the lessons from Grenfell were that if you that we need to have a design control, and actually it's important that once we've agreed that that's actually what happens. So from that perspective, I think that will be I think there's going to be some changes, but I think those changes will be for the better, and I think they'll be beneficial for everyone actually to have that more kind of structured approach. I mean, from the point of view of from clients, their assessment and what we're hoping to achieve. I mean, we're hoping to achieve that that clients recognise that actually this process and going through the process and actually having duties, because clients will have duties under the new requirements, will be beneficial for them, and actually we could avoid that, as I say, that race to the bottom by putting in place proper standards and proper planning and ensuring that actually that there is a structured process in place which takes us forward.
So under this new regime, the bit that Hackett described as clients feeling their responsibility, understanding and feeling their responsibility, they will, you believe, stop many of the bad practices that are currently seen in the industry?
Well, I think that the client plays an important role. There's no question about that, and I think the expectations will be that the new regulatory regime will essentially provide a vehicle that structures not just the clients but the principal contractors, the subcontractors, everyone in the chain will have to provide a much more of a robust evidence base and really demonstrate they are requiring complying with the regs in a way that hasn't been seen before. And certainly, if clients are getting on board with this and understand this and buy into this process and are advised by their principal contractors and principal designers as to how this works in practice, I think that will be beneficial for everyone, because I think it's important that everyone gets buy-in, and that ultimately, as you say, that includes clients as well.
You've talked quite a bit about evidence of competence and compliance. Does that include everything? Are we talking about Part L as well, or are we simply talking about fire safety here?
So the competency requirements will, within the law, talk about the building regulations. They don't make any particular specifications around structural safety and fire safety. That said, from a risk-based approach, the regulator, we will be looking primarily at structural safety and fire safety in the first instance. So that will be where we will be focusing our risk base, but actually we will be the building control body for high-rise buildings across the entire building regs. So that will include everything. So the competency is is holistic, but as I say, our focus primarily will be in the first instance fire safety and structural safety.
So how do you see the role of the specialist trades, the specialist engineers, say in ventilation or heating contractors? How will their role change?
I don't necessarily think the role will change. I think depending on, well, potentially their role could change if they become a designer or a principal designer or a contractor or a principal contractor. So I think they will need to be aware of the new requirements on those particular duty holders. And I think what I would say is that everyone would need to have awareness. And I think the awareness depends on the work they're undertaking, where they're undertaking it, how intrusive that is. But awareness of fire safety, awareness of structural safety as a minimum, I think will be important and will be seen as a new normal when it comes to work, in the same way that asbestos awareness training is the expectation when it comes to a health and safety environment.
So would it be good advice to our members to say that, you know, more than ever you should be able to evidence your competence and compliance throughout the project and after?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think these new requirements will mean that from a regulatory point of view, those questions will be asked a lot more frequently, and there will be an expectation that everyone throughout the whole project, from the principal contractors all the way down to the subbies, can evidence the competence that they have to perform the task that they're doing.
And once you've completed the works, you want full photographic evidence of what you've done and records, everything that can help you prove that what you did at the time was correct. Would that be fair?
Well, I think it has to be proportionate. I think what we're not looking for a kind of a blanket, everyone to take a photograph of every single aspect of the work that they're doing. I mean, I think it needs to be proportionate, and I think it needs to be proportionate to the project and the work that's being carried out within it. I think that links back into the golden thread, and I think if it's fundamental or if it's safety critical, then yes. But I don't think we'd want excessive record taking, but I think we need the right record taking. And I think that's something that we're going to have to work our way through, and we're going to be providing more guidance on that, because I understand that nuance is going to be quite challenging, and I think we're going to be providing much more guidance on how to make those quite difficult decisions.
I think that would be very welcome, because many clients default to I want everything when they don't need everything. And a good way to hide information is to bury it in amongst everything, as you rightly said. I'm afraid our time is up, Andrew. Thank you very much. It's always great to get insight from the HSE. We're great supporters of the Building Safety Act and the new regulator, and wish you all the best and good luck with it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And we will see you at the next session. Just a quick thank you to our headline sponsor, Mitsubishi Electric again. I will catch you in the next one. Thank you.